Good morning to you.
Morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Look, you were a political editor of many years standing, Isabel. I just want to get your thoughts quickly in terms of the economic situation we're in right now. Interest rates about to go up. People, Tory MPs blaming the Bank of England. Pressure from Keir Starmer, looking like 1.4 million people coming off their fixed rate mortgages, facing sky high interest, extra payments of almost £3,000 on average a year that they don't have. No sign of interest rates really coming down anytime soon. There is so much pressure on Rishi Sunak. What should he be doing now?
Well, what he should be doing is cutting taxes. I mean, it's not the case that he has no levers to pull here. There are levers available. And you're right in what you were saying earlier. I mean, this affects, practically everybody, either directly or indirectly. You don't have to have a mortgage to be affected by it because, of course, rents are soaring up, not least because landlords with mortgages have to increase the rent to cover the mortgage. Yeah. So, this is a bit of a vicious circle, isn't it? And the other slightly surprising thing is what may surprise some people is that even the very wealthiest people often have mortgages because it has been so cheap to borrow. So that has been a way of staying wealthy, if you like. People may not have much sympathy for those.
They're not top of our concern, are they?
But they are being hammered too. And politically, that's important because they tend to make a lot of noise. I think this is a real problem for Sunak. And I think he starts needing to look at lowering taxes in order to pull the levers that he has available to him.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Look, let's turn our attention now to the COVID inquiry that you, of course, I think we're going to learn more from the leaks that you provided of Matt Hancock, the former Health Secretary's WhatsApps, than we're ever going to learn at all from in the COVID inquiry. It seems to be complete. I mean, we've already blamed Brexit for our pandemic deaths. I mean, it's not boding very well. Yesterday, we heard evidence at the COVID inquiry from Jeremy Hunt, former Health Secretary, now, of course, Chancellor. Also, Oliver Dowden, current Deputy Prime Minister. Today, we're going to hear from the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Advisor, Chris Whitty, and Patrick Vallance. That'll be interesting. Again, it seems to me I'd like a month of hearings with them. But I think, crucially, what was interesting from what Jeremy Hunt had to say, he was chair of the Health Select Committee at the time as a backbench MP when the COVID hit. But he says the UK's preparedness was too focused on influenza, we've heard that a lot, and limited by groupthink. It was part of a narrowness of thinking. And he also said that basically we wouldn't have had to lock down in March 2020 if we had gone to quarantining people coming from abroad and isolating people who had symptoms sooner. He's always got the solutions, hasn't he, Jeremy Hunt?
Well, Jeremy Hunt's rather got away with this because nobody really picked up on a section of the evidence of the COVID inquiry earlier this week in which he was found to have repeatedly failed to engage with COVID pandemic planning. There was a very, very damning memo produced in evidence. It was an official sensitive memo, meaning it was a semi-secret memo, in which the members of the board of pandemic planning expressed grave concerns that the then Secretary of State was not engaging with the process. There was even a suggestion that that might have been a breach of ministerial codes. It's also worth pointing out that Jeremy Hunt was a massive proponent of ever harsher lockdown.
Oh, exactly. There's an extraordinary video of him. If you ever just want to sort of, not sleep for a week, just imagine him having been in charge of us over that time. There's a video of him where he's talking about how, in a Zoom interview, that, well, his sister was living in China and she got off the plane and she was escorted by an official to her home and basically locked into her home. And that was the sort of thing they were doing in China that was keeping people safe. And he was saying this with this sort of weird smile and glaring eyes he had. I mean, frankly, I found that absolutely terrifying. The entire time during this, he was calling on more Chinese-style measures.
That's what he was doing behind the scenes, and our TalkTV colleague Nadine Dorries has provided quite powerful evidence of that, not to the inquiry but to others. I'm a little bit less negative about the inquiry this week than I have been, in that we have had some interesting admissions and concessions, in particular from the former Chief Medical Officer, Dame Sally Davies, who spoke powerfully about the impact of lockdowns. More of that, please. And I think...
Although she still says she thinks the first lockdown was right. And I mean, I supported the first lockdown at the beginning. I didn't want it to be sooner or harsher, but I very quickly realised. But she was at least bringing that... I mean, she was someone who was, you know, a credible person, part of the medical establishment, and questioning this. But what is so frustrating is people were supporting lockdowns. There's all the conversation has been so far, and this is module 1, this is what they're doing, is the lack of planning. Why didn't they plan for this sort of, you know, MERS, SARS type illness rather than flu? I don't personally think that would have made any difference, but why they hadn't discussed lockdown. They hadn't discussed lockdown. SAGE, the minutes of SAGE meetings as advisors, they never discussed lockdown. Why? Because it was such an absurd, stupid, crazy, authoritarian thing to do that it had never even been considered by any democratically elected government before.
I mean, look, it's too painful for the vast majority of people who imposed this on us to actually admit how wrong they were. But what we are beginning to see is little chinks in the armour. So written evidence from Sir Chris Whitty apparently acknowledges that too much attention was paid to SAGE without an offsetting narrative and debate and discussion about the economic impact of all of this. It wasn't Chris Whitty's job, to be fair, to consider the economic impact, but it's good that we're beginning to get those acknowledgements.
Do you think people are waking up to this? Because, again, I think, you know, anyone listening to my show at the time was sitting there in my bedroom with COVID, and this would have realised, you know, pretty early on, I woke up to this. The people, you know, who made me think, well, hold on a minute, you're right, this isn't right, this isn't going to save any lives, that they've got these figures wrong. Now, you know, there are some purists. I never looked down. I never wore a mask. I know. Well done. You never had the vaccine, whatever. You know, people. You can make your choices. And the one thing I've always gone for is people to be able to make their own choices. But I mean, I believed at the time, because Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance weren't pushing for lockdown when the media was, where everyone, oh, we've seen pictures of in Italian hospitals. That must be the answer. It's what the Chinese have done. They've held out against that. And I thought, well, when they said, no, we do need to lock down, OK, fair enough. These people have been very sensible. Everything they've said to mid-March had been very sensible, flattening the curve, blah, blah, blah. That I thought that they knew what they were doing. But what's emerged from those WhatsApps that you were able to leak in the lockdown files to the Telegraph from Matt Hancock is that no decisions were made based on medical analysis or scientific analysis or proper data or weighing up of the costs and benefits. This was never done. No, whether it was masks, whether it was closing schools, whether it was quarantining. There is not a single policy that seems to have been done on the basis that all policy in government should be done, particularly when it takes away our civil liberties and kills off the economy, which is this, yeah, we might do this and it might have this effect, but the negative effect might be this, and that's far greater. And we've seen a recent study, an international study, showing we've probably saved 1,700 lives or something in total extra. That's all it saved. That many people die most days, even without a pandemic.
Yes, that's right. I mean, those WhatsApps show just how many decisions were based on, frankly, political vanity, ambition, and politicians hoping to use this crisis to better their own careers. That said, in fairness, of course, they were also trying to save lives, but in their messianic zeal to do this now, they didn't think about cost of lives later.
But that's their job. This thing, we're always told they didn't know. We did know. We barely know anything more about COVID now than we knew at the very beginning. And it was their job, the civil servants and the medical advisors and the elected representatives. It was their job to make that look at that equation.
And very hopefully in the later stages of the inquiry, much more of this will be debated. I think we can, just trying to be a bit positive here, I think that we can take some encouragement from, even at this very early stage of the inquiry, we are beginning to see a few very high level admissions that lockdowns were a catastrophe. More to come.
Absolutely. Isabel Oakeshott, such a pleasure to speak to you. As you know, you're not only a friend, but one of my heroes for what you did with those WhatsApps. And absolutely did the public a great service there. So